Welcome to the Phoenix Prosperity Podcast, where wealth meets legacy. Join your host, Tim Fergestad, as we explore the journeys of Phoenix's finest to success and beyond.
Hello, this is Tim Fergestad. Thank you for joining us. Today we're joined by Erica Brinker. Erica has led sustainability and commercial strategy at Honeywell, Array Technologies, and Chaperton, and now founder of At the Brink Media, consulting on executive growth. Excited to dive into her impact and leadership. Welcome to the show, Erica.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right. So why don't you give us a quick snapshot of how you got to where you're at, your origin story, if you will.
I like to start at the very beginning because people seem to find that fascinating. I've made a lot of pivots. I went to school at American University and then transferred to Penn State. And then I went on internship in New York City at a place called Liz Claiborne, which is a brand from the 80s. It was where when women were entering the workforce, it was kind of like your go-to power suit.
Right.
And I interned there in marketing, and I ended up staying in New York for about 8 years. I worked there, which now is basically Kate Spade. I worked at Tiffany and Company in their global marketing department, and then I also worked at Ralph Lauren. And so
those are a lot of big names.
Yeah, so I got my start in fashion and in brands that really had deep-rooted marketing focus areas. And so I feel like that was a great foundation. I ultimately ended up getting hired here in Phoenix by a healthcare technology company called the Core Institute, which is all over the Valley.
Sure. My wife worked there for a little while.
Who did?
My wife. She's an anesthesiologist. She worked there. She did some pain management with them for a couple of years.
Wow, that's fascinating. Yeah, I was doing everything from helping the recruitment of new physicians to the marketing, the PR, employee communications, but a lot of BD. One of the biggest things that we focused on was around standardized care and how you worked with hospitals to get their physicians busy and billable. It was an eye-opening experience just to see the inner workings of the healthcare industry and how it all works.
Yeah. For sure.
It's complicated. It's tough. I think it's become even more complicated. I think providers are really struggling with that whole environment because of the way insurance companies are working. So I think it's, there's probably a reckoning coming there. But it was a great place to get acquainted with Phoenix. And what I ultimately ended up doing while I was working there is I went to Thunderbird for my MBA. So I worked full time and I went to school full time and I did my executive MBA there. And the Core Institute was very generous in giving me every other Friday off for 18 months because the program required Fridays and Saturdays every other week. 3 international trips. And so when I graduated, I was kind of feeling like I could move anywhere in the world. You kind of get the international bug when you go to Thunderbird. They're focused.
I've had a number of people on the show from there who've done that. Yeah, who've had international
expat experiences or something like that. Yeah. A friend of mine had forwarded my resume to the chief technology officer at the time of Honeywell Aerospace, unbeknownst to me. And so I got a call for a role there, a marketing role. And to be honest, I was not interested. I didn't know anything about aerospace. It sounded boring to me. I just kind of thought, and it seemed stale and unexciting, which is ironic coming from the healthcare industry, which is all those things also. But every person I met at Honeywell was smarter than the next. And 6 months of interviews and 11 people later, I wanted this job so badly.
Oh, cool.
And so I ultimately was hired on as their, I don't know if it was director of global marketing or something like that. And then I got promoted over time. I ultimately departed as chief marketing officer and VP of commercial excellence, which is kind of their go-to-market sales organization.
Did your fashion experience give you an advantage coming into that industry with a whole different perspective?
So it's really funny when the person that hired me at the time, who he's still in the Valley, and I'm actually having lunch with him next week. When he hired me, one of the worst things he did for me was in my announcement, put all those brand names out to the entire aerospace community at Honeywell. Because, when you're at a place that's so engineering heavy,
Yeah.
they want to know that you're kind of an engineer. Almost everybody there, even if they're not doing engineering, the
Right.
general managers, many of them are engineers. And so it took me a while to gain credibility as a non-engineer to market aerospace products. And to be honest, it was the biggest portfolio of products that I had ever
Okay.
managed. And so the learning curve was the steepest I ever encountered. But what's interesting, and what I found in so many pivots, because, I've been in renewables now for the last 5 years too. The most interesting thing, and that's what I tell people, whatever your craft is, 90% of it is the craft itself, and maybe 10% is figuring out how to adapt it to the market and the industry that you're in.
Okay.
Almost everything I did at Ralph Lauren, I did at Honeywell. Although what's tough about B2B companies like Honeywell is that B2B has tended to be behind the times in technology and the way that they go to market. And so when I arrived at Honeywell, they weren't doing social media. Social media was very much on the scene, but nobody was doing it. So implementing things like, Facebook campaigns and LinkedIn campaigns and all of the things that you think on the B2C side were second nature. So really bringing them up to speed on just technologically, really, our email marketing, which I remember walking into my office like that first week, and there was a fax machine right outside my office. And I was like, does anybody really use this anymore? And sure enough, there were faxes coming through. So, the aerospace industry doesn't have the benefit with all the regulatory constraints as moving as fast as everyone else. But
That's true.
yeah,
Kind of same with medicine, right?
exactly.
They're slow adopters because of
For good reason.
regulations, right?
Yeah, for safety purposes, it's a good reason. But no, it's an interesting question. How much really applied? I'd say so much of it applied, and I would say the two reasons that person hired me into Honeywell was my experience outside of the industry.
Right. That's
And
what I
also
thought.
they were going through a phase where they were really focused on hiring people with MBAs. They wanted marketers that also had a strong business foundation.
Okay. Okay. But you
So,
had some challenges internally at Honeywell.
well, I really enjoyed it. It was the smartest bunch of people I've ever worked with. I call Honeywell a university. Because you just learn so much, and you're working with people that are the best at their craft, and that motivates you to be your best. And
Right.
so I spent 5 years in aerospace, and then I moved into a role at corporate, a newly created role for brand. And I thought it was amazing because we had a new CEO. They were really focused on uniting the companies. At the time, they were four different publicly reported companies, all under kind of the Honeywell umbrella. And the new CEO felt his legacy was a couple of things. One was what he called One Honeywell. How do we present to investors that we're one company, not four separate companies? Because they ultimately wanted to trade at a higher multiple. Honeywell was
Sure.
already trading at the highest multiple for an industrial company. And so the second thing he really saw as his legacy was an evolution of the brand, and around not just being an industrial company, but being a software industrial. That all of the businesses sell hardware, but what was little known even by our customers was how much software we designed to accompany that hardware. And
Right.
so this VP of brand role that I took on was really about telling those stories, showcasing the products, elevating the story behind the software. And the tagline was called "The Future is What We Make It." And that campaign still lives on today. And I've been gone from there for 6 years. So it's
Yeah.
living a nice, a good life. It was a great investment. They even have a different CEO now, and the brand is still lived on. Maybe most successfully for employees. They really gravitated to it. The unique thing about working at a place that has 120,000 employees is that a lot of employees, unless you were in marketing or at corporate, didn't know all the things that Honeywell
Oh,
made,
right.
all the firsts that Honeywell has had in history, whether it be space or with chemicals, oil and gas processing. Their engineers have invented a lot of things. And so employees were kind of wowed by discovering that the place they were working at had such a esteemed history.
And impact.
Yeah, exactly. Huge impact. So it engendered a lot of pride in the employees themselves too, which was like super fun to see. And we saw like one of
Super
the most
valuable.
amazing stats out of the campaign, because we even did a TV commercial. Out of the campaign, we saw a 50% increase in applications to job roles. And so it was like, oh, Honeywell's not old, it's new. But
And probably, I mean, retention of strong people too is incredibly valuable.
absolutely. Like I work at a cool place. You also had, I mean, when you run in a company, big companies have pluses and minuses. You could go a lot of places. You could go around the world. You could go, up in your career. There was a lot of places to go, and they were really good at creating pathways if you were willing to put in the work. I feel like it was a great place to grow in your career. And
Okay,
then
excellent.
I moved in. They stood up a freestanding software business, and so the CCO at the time at corporate who I worked for became the CEO of that software business, and that I then ended up taking that chief marketing officer and VP of commercial excellence role, which oversaw the global marketing, the pipeline for sales, your go-to-market, et cetera. And so it was really a fun role and a launching pad. I was there during COVID, and I also had my last child during COVID. And so working all time zones wasn't as enticing anymore with a newborn
Right.
baby at home. So I ultimately ended up moving on to a place called Array Technologies, which was another manufacturer. They made solar hardware. They're called trackers. Those trackers are what hold and manage, and the software manages kind
Yeah,
of
the
the inputs
positioning.
from the solar panels. Exactly. So I was a public officer there, chief commercial officer, and it was a super fun experience. And then, what I realized about the renewables industry is that the food chain worked a little differently than what I was used to. And solar development, think about real estate development, but for solar, finding land, getting the interconnections, the licensing, hiring all the contractors, getting the thing turned on, right? Your solar plant turned on.
Very, very policy driven.
Extremely policy driven. And so at Array, I led not just the commercial aspect of it. I was our head of ESG, so spoke to investors quite a bit because they were a newly public company. So I implemented our ESG program. I implemented our government relations program, which was super fun, something I'd never had exposure to before. Array wasn't as impacted by policy, but certainly when I moved to Shaberton, it's all policy. Markets don't even exist without policy. And it was also different for me because it was a state by state game. I had really done a lot of lobbying for the Inflation Reduction Act on the federal level, but solar development is a state by state game. And for anyone listening in Arizona, the concept of community solar is completely foreign. But there's lots of states across the U.S. where you could actually have lower utility bills, electric bills, with community-based solar plants. So they're small solar plants that benefit the surrounding community and lower their bills.
Right.
Unfortunately, we have a political climate in Arizona that doesn't support that. And I don't know about you, but my bill just went up like 20%. And so it would be really helpful if we could implement that now. But that's kind of where kind of what led me to today. I did leave Shaberton at the end of last year, and I've started my own. I have a consulting practice and a podcast called At the Brink Media. I want to continue growing companies, growing people. So coaching, consulting for companies on how to grow. One of the things I'm really good at is scaling companies, figuring out how to make things highly repeatable, how to bring in the right people, get them in place so that they can get their flywheel going. I love working with early stage companies to do that. Or mid-stage companies that maybe are stalling out, can't figure out their go-to-market, don't really understand segmentation. One of the things that I find a lot with companies that don't have this muscle is that they don't know who their segments are, and so they tell the same message to everyone who they think is their buyer instead of really focusing on the pain point. And you find this a lot with engineering-driven companies too, where they want to talk about the product, but your
Mhm.
customers actually want to know about how you're going to help them. And so you're having a
Solve the problem.
conversation. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're not having the right conversation. So that's really where my sweet spot is: setting up sales teams, setting up the processes, the technology, and then figuring out the right go-to-market.
Okay. Yeah, but as an engineer type myself, I've struggled with that historically as well. I get too technical and people don't follow why it's important and all that stuff.
Well, that's
Um,
what I say. I play an engineer on TV because I'm not a trained engineer. Despite going to engineering camp in high school at Penn State, I ultimately did not end up. The closest I got to it was marrying an engineer. So, but I do like simplifying concepts. I think that that's sometimes exactly what you're saying, Tim, is very common. You're talking about the product because you're proud about all the functions and features, but the customer's having a really hard time figuring out, well, how does this help my business?
right, right. Okay, so that's exciting new stuff that you're doing as well. Tell us a little bit more about your podcast plans.
Sure. So the podcast genesis is based in finding your Brink moments. They could be professional, they could be personal. For me, I mean, I probably have had several moments where I felt like I was on the edge of something, whether it be a positive or negative tipping point. But the biggest change in my life came when my son passed away. It was 10 years ago. His name was
Oh,
Luca. He was 4 months old and he died in his
oh,
sleep. We don't know what happened, so they classify it as SIDS. And so for me, it really created a moment in time where you reevaluate kind of everything in your life and how you work, how you live, how you spend your time, how you think about the people in your life, how you think about what you do. It was a real rallying cry for me to find a sense of purpose,
mhm.
not just for him, but for myself. You really feel lost. I was very lucky. I was at Honeywell when he passed away. Tremendous support there, great people that really helped me through. But one of the things that I recognized through that is that so many people couldn't or wouldn't talk to me because they didn't know what to say. And so
Right,
I had to go out and seek conversations from people that have been through it. And so At the Brink is about telling stories of people going through really tough things, whether it be professionally or personally, or it's health or what have you, so that listeners can relate and find themselves in those stories and have hope that there's a way out. And so that's really the genesis of it. It was really born from my son Luca, and the consulting obviously is just using my expertise, but the podcast is really about, we think of, oh, you have a professional life, you have a personal life, but the truth of the matter is all of us have both. And whether you're a stay-at-home mom and your professional life is your home life, or you're an executive or someone growing in your career. I'm really obsessed with this idea of our second half era. Catherine O'Hare, for example, the actress from Schitt's Creek and Home Alone, she passed away
mhm,
at 71 last week.
mhm. Yep.
And it was kind of like, wow, she was only 71. So if you think about, if you were 35, the second half of your life could be at 35. I'm a little older than that, but the podcast is also talking about, like, how are we going to spend the rest of our time?
Sure.
It's the idea of what got us here won't get us there. And I just find myself thinking about that and wanting to learn from other people that are going through the same thing.
Excellent. That sounds like a great theme for a podcast, an incredibly deep and meaningful sharing opportunity too. And I thank you for sharing yours too. Are you familiar with Arthur Brooks, the author?
No.
Um, I like him. He's an academic. Uh, I last saw him on Tim Ferriss's podcast, but he's written some really good books. One of them was that I liked was From Strength to Strength. And he talks about, that transition most people have in their life from the first half into their second half, and how to navigate that, and a lot of that, particularly if your identity is wrapped up in that, right?
Right.
Good examples like professional athletes, right, or something, or
Oh, yeah.
how do I transition out of that when, and
Kind of all you've done your whole life.
right, right. And they try to cling on and they're miserable, or they find a new path and they reevaluate. And not exactly an existential crisis, but maybe.
It could be. I mean, I think that's hard. I mean, in the case of sports, and we have a lot of sports folks here in the Valley that ultimately end up retiring here. I think it is hard to find like what's your next chapter when you've basically been training since a young age for what you've done the first half of your life. So I could imagine that
Sure.
it would feel existential in many
Sure. And
ways.
there are naturally seasons to it, right? There's your exploratory educational phase, and then there's like your production phase, and then there's like your giving back phase and stuff. And yeah, it's exciting stuff for me. I'm there as well. So that's kind of a big part of what I do now is educate and share. So I
Yes, I love
appreciate
that.
that. Okay, so big goals coming up personally and professionally. Yours are merging, which is awesome.
Yes, they are. They're really coming together. And, a big catalyst for this was also that some of my kids are older. So 5 kids in total,
Oh, wow.
anywhere from 23 now all the way to 5. So I have 2 older stepsons. They were very young when my husband and I got married. And then I have a daughter that's 11 and a son that's 5. And, they need a lot more time. That I am a taxi in addition to being a mom. And, they're both in club sports. And so part of this
Yep.
transition was about making room as a mom and as a working mom to make room for the kids and make sure that I can fulfill all those duties. I think, the work from home revolution that COVID kind of spawned really helped women in a lot of ways, because we had flexibility that we didn't before. And now
Right.
with this pull to the office again, and I understand why it's happening, but they're not making work for women, who most women are the ones that are saddled with the responsibility of all the kids stuff. For me, I had to make my own opportunities so that I could kind of, be there for all the parts of my life, not just, I was in a plane for the last 10 years. I've been in a plane over 50% of the time. So something had to give.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. Um, Having older and younger kids, I think I appreciate the time that I do have as a taxi driver, though. I mean, it used to be a burden between trying to accomplish other things, and now I'm able to unplug and be present. And actually, I have a captive kid who I actually get to interact with on the car ride now, and
Yes.
you start to miss those when they're both mine are both driving, and I don't get those
Oh,
anymore. So
wow.
it's precious moments if you're in the right mindset to look for them.
I agree that's something I do feel like gratitude and being in the moment are so incredibly important. And that's something that losing my son really I was always a grateful person, but you just look at everything differently after something like that. And I do feel like that's something I can do. I feel very comfortable like sitting in the moment.
Awesome, awesome. That's absolutely a powerful pro that came out of a terrible thing.
Yes.
Okay, as we wrap things up here, legacy plans, right? Do you have, what do you want your legacy to be? Do you have legacy plans for business, your personal, all that?
I'd like to grow at the Brink Media. I'd like to write a book. That's definitely on my
Oh, cool.
list. Traveling the world. We've been lucky enough to travel a lot of places, but definitely travel. But I think overall, when people think about me, I want them to think about that I cared, that I want people to be more empathetic towards others. I think the world is very full of a lot of big feelings right now, and I'd like people to go outside of their computer or their phone and really talk to other people. And so
Right.
I'm hoping through the podcast, some of that happens and we can kind of soften the world a little bit from these
Yeah,
hard
that's great.
edges that has seemed to happen. And I also want to continue doing board work. So I will put a little plug in for the Phoenix Theater Company. I'm on the board and the executive team of the Phoenix Theater. A lot of people don't know, but it's the oldest and largest theater in the Southwest. It's been around for over 100 years. We just raised over $35 million for a new theater. So in a time where many theaters are closing down, we've opened a new one. And so that just opened back in November. And top-notch talent, top-notch directors, really incredible talent there. And so I just want to share that with the community that's
Yeah, that's
listening.
great.
If you're visiting or you're local, check it out. It's unfortunately maybe a best kept secret sometimes, and I don't quite understand why, because it's such phenomenal work that comes out of that theater.
Okay, excellent. Do you offhand, do you know what's coming up this spring?
Oh my gosh. They have 3 different theaters running at all times.
Oh,
So
wow. Okay. Do you have a website?
They do. So yeah, phoenixtheatercompany.com. Go on it. It might be .org actually. So check me, but Google will get you there. But the Phoenix Theater Company, they have something for everybody. It's plays, it's musicals. They have everything from Disney productions to independent shows. But one of the coolest things about the theater is that it's becoming a theater where if you have a Broadway show and they want to test it before it goes to Broadway, we're starting to get those first performances.
Oh, cool.
And so it really unique experiences. And they also have a restaurant right there too. So you can make a whole night of it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Definitely have to check that out. Thank you.
Please do.
All right. So, yeah, I guess I often ask about upcoming initiatives. It's the business, but also the podcast which is great.
Launching in May. So look out for a YouTube channel. It is going to be an in-person format. So at least for now, we're going to have
Right.
in-person.
Thanks.
But it launches in May. So I'm really excited to share it.
Okay. Sounds great. Erica, if people would like to connect with you and learn more, where can they go? What should they do?
I'm very active on LinkedIn. So you can find me at Erica Brinker. You can also email me if you have guest suggestions at hello@thebrinkmedia.com. And I'd love to hear from you. If you have a story to tell, I would love to talk to you about sharing your story.
Excellent. This has been great. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for listening and watching. Thank you very much, Erica Brinker, for joining me and sharing your personal and professional experiences and insights. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Inspired by our guests? Visit phoenixprosperitypodcast.com/guest and join us on the show and share your success story with Tim. The spotlight awaits.